Hey everybody, it's Jason from the Texas Gun Vault, and once again I'm coming to you with another range report. And in today's range report, we're going to be taking a look at a really cool variant of the Bren Ten. Now, I recently did a range report on the Bren Ten Standard. Essentially, the Bren Ten everybody knows and loves from Dornaus and Dixon. It's kind of the OG of 10mm pistols, and it was made famous in a 1980s television show called Miami Vice, and the character that Don Johnson played carried that firearm. But the version that we're going to be taking a look at today is called the Marksman Special, and it is a match 45. Yes, a 45 ACP chambered Bren 10. And if you've never heard of one of these, that's because they are pretty darn rare. Only 250 were ever made. Now, it should be noted that the guns that were made for Miami Vice, which there were 2 of them, were designed to fire blanks and are not counted in the 250, which this, of course, is a part of. I believe the plan was to have conversion kits for the ones in 10 to also shoot 45. In fact, the magazines are supposed to be the same for both calibers, and the magazines were kind of the Achilles heel of this gun and why they kind of became a commercial failure. So in this range report, I'm going to try to focus more on what makes this particular gun special. And if you want to know more about the Bren 10 and my review of the Bren 10 Standard and all the things that I like and don't like and the trigger pull and all that information, I'm going to ask you guys to go over and check out the original range report, and I will put a link in the description below. Go check that out because I don't want to repeat myself too much in this video. But before we get into the things that I like and don't like and talk about what's different about this pistol, of course besides the caliber, I always want to thank the people that make these videos possible. First and foremost is the owner of this really cool gun. His name is Jack. In fact, he's the second person to lend guns to my channel named Jack, so I affectionately call him Jack number 2. So thank you so much, Jack. It's an honor to get to shoot the rare guns of your collection. As always, I want to thank my Patreon supporters because through their monthly donations and support, they help keep the lights on around here, and I couldn't do all of this without them. And if you guys want to join my Patreon for as little as $1 a month and get all these videos early, there will be a link in the description. And as always, I want to thank my primary sponsor who always provides the ammunition for these range reports and thus makes them financially feasible for me to make, my good friend Mark from Brownworks. And if you're here to check out a review on a really cool all-metal firearm that takes panel grips, well, I know you probably have a great collection of fine firearms yourself. You might have a 1911, a Browning High Power, a CZ75, or a Beretta 92, just to name a few, and you would love to have a set of customized wood grips to make your firearm one of a kind and unique. Well, I have the perfect grip company for you, Brownworks. Brownworks is a custom grip company making a wide variety of grips for a wide variety of firearms out of a wide variety of exotic woods and materials. I am always talking about the amazing work of Mark. He's an artist, he's a craftsman. He's always coming up with new and innovative products besides grips, including things like pistol stands and wood grips for, yes, modern sporting rifles. He can make grips out of laminate wood, apply custom textures, custom logos, custom engravings, essentially anything you can imagine he can make. So I'm going to ask you guys to go over and check out his website. I'm going to put a pinned comment on this video as well as a coupon code for 10% off your first order. I'm going to ask you guys to go over there and check out everything he has to offer. And when you place that one-of-a-kind custom order for grips for your gun, please tell him the Texas Gun Vault sent you. Alright, so let's talk about the gun we have on the table tonight. Once again, we're taking a look at the Dornaus Dixon Bren 10 Marksman Special Match 45, a 45 ACP chambered Bren 10 pistol. This is one of 250 that were made, a very rare variant, so it's really cool to have one of these here at the Texas Gun Vault to shoot and review. One of the big differences between this gun and the standard version is not the magazines themselves, because this magazine is designed for both 10mm and 45, but is the capacity. In 10mm, these hold 10 rounds, but in 45 ACP, they only hold 8. So we get a little bit less capacity, and that might be a big downside to this gun to a lot of people. And these magazines in general, as I mentioned, were kind of the Achilles heel of this gun. They had problems getting them to work and the manufacturing of them, and many of these pistols ended up getting shipped without magazines, which is something that would not fly today. And because of all the problems, this company went out of business and the Bren Ten went out of production, and it's really all because of these magazines, and that's why this gun is considered to be a commercial failure. Now, I want to talk about the things that I like and don't like about this gun, and once again, I'm going to ask you guys to go check out my original range report on the standard Bren Ten, because the list of things that I like and don't like is kind of exhaustive. I really don't want to repeat myself here, but I do want to give you some of the highlights. The first thing about this gun that I like is the fact that it is made of stainless steel. I think stainless steel is just a great material to make firearms out of. It's easy to clean. I think it's very attractive, and it's a very durable material. It's not going to rust. You can use it in all weather conditions. I find that stainless steel is just an awesome material for guns, and I think this was one of the eras when stainless steel was becoming more pronounced in gun manufacturing, and I think it really gives it that classic 1980s look. Another thing about this gun that I like, especially over the standard version, is this gun has enlarged controls. So obviously this gun was probably designed for competition, thus the name Match 45. So we have an extended slide release, extended safety, so that will really help you manipulating this firearm. I do like the fact that this gun is in 45, because 10mm might be a little bit too stout for some people, and it might be a little bit on the expensive side. So if you had one of these, and originally they were going to have conversion kits to go between the two different calibers, it would give you an option to have a more affordable caliber to shoot and train with if you wanted to necessarily carry the 10mm but practice in 45. So I think it's really cool that you have a gun like this, originally intended for 10mm, but now chambered in 45. The last thing I really like about this particular gun is the grip texture. And not many companies in the 1980s were putting on front straps and back straps that look like this. This looks like a very modern grip design, and I really do feel like they were a little bit ahead of their time. That looks absolutely fantastic. It's not too aggressive, but it's definitely going to stick in the palm of your hand if they are wet or oily. I really do think from a competition standpoint, especially for a gun of that era, they did a really good job in trying to think, what would a competitive shooter really want and find attractive in a pistol? So this front strap and back strap, I think, are milled out great with this checkering. It looks fantastic, and I think it's very functional. So now let's talk about a couple things about this gun that I don't like. And the first thing is something that I noticed with the original Bren Ten, and that is this gun is very rattly. So not even doing anything to it, if I just shake this gun, it's just a very rattly gun. Now, I will say the tolerances on this gun are a little bit better than the standard version, but if I drop the magazine and rack the slide, you'll even hear it just sounds gritty. It's not a smooth action. I feel like the tolerances are just off on this particular pistol, and it kind of gives it a very cheap feel. Another thing that I really don't like is this gun has a ton of writing on it. Here on the side of the frame, it says you can order an owner's manual from them. It gives their address. Get this off the frame. There's no need to have a book written on it. I think you have a relatively very attractive firearm based off of the CZ75. And I know some people are going to say, that's not based off the CZ75. It's based off the CZ97, because that's the one chambered in 45. Yes, Yes, I know, but the 97 is based off the CZ75, so it's going back to the same gun when it comes to its provenance. But besides having the writing here on the side, we also have some writing here on the top saying caution, read manual. Man, this thing has so much writing on it. Get all of that off the gun. It looks absolutely terrible. And finally, the last thing about this gun that I don't like is the magazines. These things are actually pretty darn thick. And I guess we would call this a staggered stack magazine. And because these were designed for both 10 and 45, you only get 8 rounds in this big magazine. And I know this was a gun in the 1980s, but come on, we could have done a little bit better with this. And of course, if you know the history of this gun, the magazines just were not well designed, and people had a ton of problems with it. So that's really the highlights about what makes this gun a little bit different and what I like and don't like about it. So let's get this gun to the range. Let's see how it shoots. And after shooting the 1 in 10 millimeter, I'm curious if this one is going to be as accurate, because the 1 in 10 millimeter really was. And I'm curious if I'm going to have the same problems I had with the other one, or will new problems present with this one? So there's only one way to find out. So as always, I want to start with the target at just 7 yards. I'm going to put 2 magazines through this and just see what my initial thoughts and impressions are. See what the shootability of this gun is like. What's the recoil impulse? And of course, just make sure that it works. So here we go. Let's go to the range and take the Marksman Special Match 45 Bren 10 to the range and put it through its paces. All right, so what did I discover about this pistol? Well, first of all, it is just as accurate as the 1 in 10 millimeter. I'm very impressed with the natural shootability and accuracy of this gun. I also noticed that the recoil impulse of this, of course it's in 45, is a lot less than 10 millimeter, but the 10 millimeter version had very manageable recoil. So this thing really kind of shoots like a 9 millimeter. It's a very heavy and stout gun, so it's very comfortable to shoot. And if you're someone that doesn't like 45, you actually might like this one a lot. Now let's talk about the ejection. I noticed that when this gun ejected, many times it was coming back at the 5 or the 6 o'clock position, and quite a few of them landed on top of my head or hit me in the face. And that could be because of the ejector and the extractor. Now the extractor on this slide is kind of an internal and external extractor, and I don't really know about the weights and the design of that, if that is a problem, that maybe it gets worn over time, but it's definitely ejecting back into my face and getting in the way. The last thing that I noticed about this gun is when I reinserted a magazine on a slide that was open, it would actually close. And so right now, with the magazine empty, it won't do it. But if the magazine was full, it would. And it really depends on which magazines I do this with. I have about 5 magazines for this range report, and 3 or 4 of them will close the slide. And I'm not a big fan of that. I don't know if that's part of the design because it is a match gun designed for competition, or it's just the fact that there's something wrong with the slide stop or the magazine. I'm not really a big fan of that. I would much rather have the magazine go in and me rack the slide or push down on the slide stop. I don't like giving up that control. It might help in some circumstances with fast reloads, but I also think this could be a problem going forward. So that's my initial thoughts and impressions. So now let's go back to the range. Let's double the distance on this target. I'm going to put 2 more magazines through it and just see if the accuracy continues at a further distance, and if I discover anything else about this pistol that I like or don't like, and I'll report back to you. And this gun continues to be a very easy gun to shoot and handle. I am very impressed with how it handles 45 ACP. It's a very soft shooting firearm. And I'm still having problems with the cases being ejected back into my face at the 5 or the 6 o'clock position. And when I put in the second magazine, once again, the slide went home without me having to do anything. Luckily, it didn't cause any malfunction, but that's just something about this gun that I don't like. I'm not sure if it's part of the design. So the next test I often do is the bench rest test or the shoot from a barrier test. However, this time I'm not going to do that, and I will explain why a little bit later in this range report. But for right now, the next test I want to do is the hollow point test. I'm just curious, will a gun from the 80s shoot hollow points? I'm not really sure about the availability of hollow point ammunition back in this era, and if they were thinking about that when it came to the feed ramps of these guns and the magazines. Sometimes these older guns can be a little bit finicky when it comes to hollow point projectiles. So I just want to see if this gun is going to be able to feed this accurately and reliably, and just keep the gun cycling. So here we go. Let's put some hollow points through this. Let's see how it does and just make sure that it works. And just like the Bren 10 chambered in 10mm, this one feeds hollow points just fine. You'll also notice that not every magazine closes the slide on reinsertion. So that is something to note. And as I said, I'm not 100% sure if it's supposed to do that or not. I really can't tell because only 1 or 2 magazines don't close the slide and 3 do. So maybe somebody that knows a little bit more about this gun could tell us in the comment section below. It would be really helpful. All right, so the next test I want to do is the quick magazine change test. Now normally I just do this with 2 mags. However, I got 5 of these magazines at my disposal here, and because they only hold 8 rounds, I kind of thought, well, I'll see how fast I can shoot 5 8-round magazines through this gun. So let's go back to the range. Let's shoot this thing fast. Let's see how quickly I can change the magazines out and get the gun back in action. All right, and as you can see, we had a very unique failure, and this is something you're only going to see on a Bren 10 because this gun not only has a frame-mounted safety on the side, it also has a safety on the slide. And you push that through and that disengages the firing pin. And the whole point of this is if you wanted to safely decock this gun, you can push this safety on, pull the trigger, and the round won't go off. But one of the complaints with this safety is if you are going to rack the slide, as you can see my thumb goes right here on the cocking serrations, and if you do it wrong, you can engage that safety when you pull the slide back. And that time the magazine did not close the slide, and when I racked the slide, I accidentally engaged that safety. So when the gun went up to be fired again, all I had was a click. And this was a very common complaint complaint about the design of this pistol, and I can see how that's really weird and not the standard manual of arms for a pistol like this. I actually think, although it's called a safety, this could be dangerous because the gun may go bang when you expect a click, and it may go click when you expect a bang. All right, so I got 4 magazines left. So let's try this again. Let's once again see how fast I can shoot this and get the magazines changed out. So let's go back to the range. And surprise, 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 we had another problem, and it was with the magazine. So the magazine that I picked up on the reload had a 45 ACP cartridge right up here at the top, but one of the problems with these mags is that they don't actually retain the cartridges that well. So as I brought it up, the cartridge partially came out, and when I tried to insert it into the gun, it got caught in the mag well, it pulled the round out, and it jammed the magazine in the pistol. And this is another common problem and complaint with these guns because of the magazines. They were just so poorly designed. All right, I want to try this once more. I got 3 magazines left, so hopefully I'll be able to do this right and not have any problems. So let's go back to the range one more time and see if I can get this gun to work. And finally, I got it to run like I wanted it to. All right, so let's talk about the results. This is a very naturally pointing fire, and when I do this test, often I'm just point shooting. I'm trying to pretend like I'm using the gun in a self-defense scenario. I had all rounds on the silhouette. I can shoot the gun really fast. Overall, I'm very impressed with this performance when the gun decides that it wants to run right. This is also where the slide closing on the reinsertion of a magazine actually helps because it makes that whole process a lot quicker. I'm not having to grab the slide. So that might be a pro or a con depending on how you like to run your guns. All right, so the next test I want to do is finally the bench rest or the shoot from a barrier test. Now, when I film these range reports, I often do this test last because I have to readjust the shooting bench, adjust the camera down, get a stool out, put the bag on the bench, and it's just the last thing I normally film, even though I show it as the 3rd segment. And I'm going to try to do it this time, but you're going to find out that I'm going to discover a problem with this firearm before I even shoot it, but I want to show you what this is. And did you catch it? Yeah, the gun no longer has a rear sight. It had a rear sight earlier in the range report, but at some point it fell off. And when could it have fallen off? Well, I just did the quick magazine change test. Well, it turns out on the very last round of the last magazine, the rear sight came out. And I caught it on film. So let me show you what happened. And hopefully you saw it fly off. It actually came back and hit me in the chest, and I didn't even notice it. I just thought it was another cartridge coming back into my face or hitting my body at the 6 o'clock position. But this shows us and exposes to us another design flaw with this gun, and that is the rear sight. Now you'll notice the gun does have a rear sight again. I was able to find it after about 5 minutes crawling on the ground, but the rear sight of this gun is held in by an Allen screw on this side and on this side. It's not one pin that goes all the way through. So if you take out or adjust one of these, the whole sight will simply pop out. And if you want to adjust the windage, you have to release one or loosen one and then tighten the other one, and it moves it over. And if you do it wrong, the sight comes out. And apparently this was a little bit loose. There's also a spring under the rear sight, and you can adjust the elevation through this screw in the front. But when this sight came out, that little tiny spring flew out and I was not able to find it. And luckily, over on the Texas Gun Vault 2, I show my solution to this is I was able to cut down an AK-47 spring, which I believe was the firing pin spring, and I was able to manufacture or make another replacement spring which works for this sight. So luckily I was able to put this sight back on. But because I didn't have that option at the range, I was unable to complete this test. So that's why we don't have a barrier or bench rest test, because I was not expecting the rear sight of this pistol to fall off, or at least come off and hit me in my face. But it did. So that's what happens. And this exposes a huge design flaw with this gun. So what are my final thoughts on the Marksman Special Match 45 Bren Ten by Dornaus and Dixon? Well, pretty much my comments on this gun mirror the version in 10mm. This gun is actually very accurate and it functions very well, with the exception of this one ejecting into my face. However, the gun is obviously poorly made. We have some very poor design decisions like the rear sight, the frame-mounted safety. The gun is just simply rattly. It doesn't feel like the tolerances are good. I kind of feel like the gun was maybe rushed in production. It's just not a very refined gun. It's definitely a cool gun. It looks fantastic, but when you actually hold it, take it apart, you realize it's not manufactured all that well. And so I really want to love this gun because it is historical, it is rare, it's very collectible. But when it comes to its function, well, I have some issues with it, and it definitely has some design flaws. So as I said, pretty much it mirrors all of my thoughts on the 10mm version. And on that version, I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. And I really liked its accuracy. And I love the accuracy with this gun as well. However, with the rear sight coming off and having all the problems with the magazine and the slide safety, I'm only going to give this version 2.5 stars out of 5. It runs well, and like I said in the other range report, there's so much potential in this pistol. I really wish the company could have stayed in business longer and refined this design, because I think a second or third generation of this pistol really might have been something spectacular. But overall, it's a really cool experience to get to shoot such a rare gun. But only 2.5 stars out of 5 for the Marksman Special Match 45 ACP Bren Ten by Dornaus and Dixon. So what do you guys think? What do you think about my thoughts and problems with this gun? Have you ever heard of this version? I would love to know in the comment section below. And tell me, have you ever shot this version of the gun? Because I'm curious if your thoughts mirror mine. So, as always, thanks for watching.